Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from one of Spain's most revered saints, Saint Teresa of Avila, a spirited doctor of the Church. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week as we read from Saint Teresa's book, The Interior Castle. Hello, Catholic pilgrims. Welcome back for another reading. Today we venture into the second mansion, and what St. Teresa talks about can be so applicable to many things in our lives. There are many things that we start with gusto. We desire to do a good thing, such as start working out, read an engaging book that maybe isn't easy, enter into marriage, go back to school, learn a new hobby, get better at our prayer life. And we start out with that desire and we enter into it, just like entering into the first mansion. But usually with these good things that we desire to do, there's something that we are going to have to give up to fully engage in them. Like with working out, we are going to have to give time and watch our diets. My trainer from years ago when we were stationed back in California, he always told me, you can't outwork a bad diet. And if we're reading a difficult book, we are going to have to put in some effort. Like this book, or when we read the Bible, or even a really good classic. We may not be able to just kick back and read it with half our brains, like some of the books of today. And when we enter into marriage, we are going to have to drop our self-entitlement and die to self for love of other. If we go back to school, we're going to have to give up entertainment time in order to buckle down and study. And to get better in our prayer life or our spiritual life, we are going to have to forego sleep by maybe getting up early or going to bed a little later. These are all sacrifices that are good and necessary if we want to advance to the next stage. And there's a balance that has to happen. Too often people try to go crazy hard at first when they enter into something. The couch potato just says one day, hey, I'm going to get in shape. And so they decide that they're just going to run a marathon in a few months and restrict their diet so hard that they're just eating plain chicken and boiled broccoli. But this is not sustainable. Or even when people enter into the Catholic Church like me, they say, oh my gosh, I am going to do everything, every practice, read all the books, everything. You know, it's a little bit cliched to say it, but when you enter into the Catholic Church, if you've, been without it for a lot of your life, it is like opening up a treasure chest and you're just enamored with all the things. But this isn't sustainable. And so typically what happens is people fizzle out. And so what we have to do is make very intentional, attainable goals for ourselves once we enter into something. We do have to drop some things, but we also have to train our discipline muscle, as my husband likes to say. So today, St. Teresa is going to talk about what happens when we enter the second mansion. Now, there's only one chapter in the second mansion, so we'll probably go through it pretty quickly. And the numbers today will be numbers 1 through 5. But before we begin, a word from our sponsor, Chrism Press. Get ready to visit Federalist Boston with the Molly Chase series by Rhonda Ortiz, starting with In Pieces. Meet Molly, a beautiful and artistic young woman struggling to keep her sanity after her father's suicide. Follow her journey as she navigates a world of gossip and scandal and discovers the true meaning of love and sacrifice. Winner of the 2020 ACFW Genesis Award for Historical Romance, this novel is a must-read for fans of historical fiction. Go to chrismpress.com to purchase your copy, and if you use the code Pilgrim15, you can get 15% off your first order. Now let's enter into the second mansion, numbers 1 through 5. Now let us consider which are the souls that enter the second mansions and what they do there. I do not wish to enlarge on this subject, having already treated it fully elsewhere, for I could not avoid repeating myself, as my memory is very bad. If I could state my ideas in another form, they would not weary you, for we never tire of reading books on this subject, numerous as they are. In this part of the castle are found souls which have begun to practice prayer. They realize the importance of their not remaining in the first mansions, yet often lack determination to quit their present condition by avoiding occasions of sin, which is a very perilous state to be in. However, it is a great grace that they should sometimes make good their escape from the vipers and poisonous creatures around them, and should understand the need of avoiding them. In some way, these souls suffer a great deal more than those in the first mansions, although not in such danger, as they begin to understand their peril, and there are great hopes of their entering farther into the castle. I say that they suffer a great deal more, for those in an earlier stage are like deaf mutes, and are not as distressed at being unable to speak, while the others, who can hear but cannot talk, find it much harder. At the same time, it is better not to be deaf, and a decided advantage to hear what is said to us. These souls hear our Lord calling them, for as they approach near to where His Majesty dwells, He proves a loving neighbor, though they may still be engaged in the amusements and business, the pleasures and vanities of this world. While in this state, we continually fall into sin and rise again, for the creatures amongst whom we dwell are so venomous, so vicious, and so dangerous that it is almost impossible to avoid being tripped up by them. Yet such are the pity and compassion of this Lord of ours, so desirous is He that we should seek Him and enjoy His company, that in one way or another He never ceases calling us to Him. So sweet is His voice that the poor soul is disconsolate at being unable to follow His bidding at once, and therefore, as I said, suffers more than if it could not hear Him. I do not mean that divine communications and aspirations received in this mansion are the same as those I shall describe later on. God here speaks to souls through words uttered by pious people, by sermons or good books, and in many other such ways. Sometimes He calls souls by means of sickness or troubles, or by some truth He teaches them during prayer. For tepid as they may be in seeking Him, yet God holds them very dear. Back when I was a counselor for victims of domestic and sexual violence, I had a pretty young girl come to me for counseling, early 20s. And she had been in the military, stationed overseas. I believe it was Afghanistan. Anyway, while she was over there, she'd started engaging in some things that she shouldn't have. And it put her in very precarious situations. Anyway, she ended up being the victim of a sexual assault. And her life from there just spiraled out of control because of that attack. And she was such a sweet girl. And I can still see her in my mind's eye sitting on my couch talking to me. She had this desire to seek help in counseling. She knew the trajectory of her life wasn't going well, and so she had that desire for help. It was like entering the first mansion. Like St. Teresa says, she had that desire to enter into her soul and start exploring. And that's the first step, as we've learned. And for the first couple of times that she came to counseling, she did the good work of attaining a lot of self-knowledge. I mean, she told me her story. She laid it all out. She was very open and honest about things. She was very open and honest about the choices that she had made after the assault that had led her down an even darker path. And she realized that she needed to move past this stage. She realized that, yes, it was good that she got it out of her system and that she told her story and that she recognized these things. She was self-aware of what her troubles were. Sometimes people deny them. And so she really did recognize that there was another stage then that she needed to move to. And she had all the elements that you need to move on. And man, I had a lot of hope for her. And to continue using the analogy, it was like she was ready to move into the second mansion. But there were things about her current lifestyle that she just couldn't seem to let go of. And they were things that were impeding her growth. The vipers, as St. Teresa calls them. St. Teresa says in number 2 today, quote, "In this part of the castle are found souls which have begun to practice prayer. They realize the importance of their not remaining in the first mansions, yet often lack determination to quit their present condition by avoiding occasions of sin, which is a very perilous state to be in," unquote. So like we talked about in the beginning, so often we desire the good thing and we set off in pursuit of it, but we really struggle to let go of those things in the present moment that will continue to inhibit our growth. The girl that came to see me, she just couldn't let go of some very dangerous and negative habits that she had picked up because of the sexual assault. They were a crutch, and frankly, she just liked the temporary pleasure that they brought. And part of her didn't fully trust that in letting those things go, that she could actually find happiness. And I think a lot of us feel that way. Like I said in the beginning, when we start working out, we don't really want to commit to really changing things. And so we try to hang on to a bad diet because we're scared that if we let go of this very pleasurable thing, that maybe our life won't be that great anymore. Maybe it won't be as enjoyable. Maybe it will be kind of dull and boring. And we just find it very difficult to trust. And so, this girl, she was even pained by the fact that she was struggling to let those things go. I mean, she recognized it. She recognized what were her occasions of sin and just her outright sins. And just like St. Teresa says, quote, "In some way, these souls suffer a great deal more than those in the first mansion, although not in such danger, as they begin to understand their peril, and there are great hopes of their entering farther into the castle," unquote. She had great hopes of one day finding a good man, getting married, and having children. And she was suffering greatly because she could logically see that if she couldn't find a way to break away from the vipers, those things might be lost to her. And that was causing her a lot of suffering because, she could hear my voice, like God speaks to us as we're moving into the next mansion. We're not deaf mutes anymore. She wasn't a deaf mute anymore. She could hear my voice telling her, okay, now this is what you need to do. Just like God speaks to the soul. And I do believe God was speaking to her as well and to her soul and urging her on. And so when we find it hard to let go of those sins, but we realize that's what we need to do, there is a great amount of suffering. And, I really saw it in this girl as she sat and had this inner fight inside of her. And here's what I think happens. I think what happens is that we expect that once we enter into the soul, once we decide that we need to pursue God, we think the road is going to be kind of easy. And, hey, I've got the desire and the want to, right? And so we have this notion, I just start on the path and, it'll be easy to reach holiness and sanctity pretty quickly because I want to. And then we all know what happens. Then we fail and we mess up And we give up because we had this unrealistic expectation. St. Teresa says in number 4, quote, "While in this state, we continually fall into sin and rise again. For the creatures amongst whom we dwell are venomous, so vicious, and so dangerous that it is almost impossible to avoid being tripped up by them." And so we must be aware of this. Once we do decide to turn to God and enter the soul, at that exact time, that is when Satan is going to unleash the vipers and bring a full assault. And he doesn't want to, quote unquote, lose us to God. And the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis are an excellent understanding of this assault and what Satan and his demons go through to, not lose us to God. And so we can't say when we trip up, "Oh, well, that's it. I'm a failure. Guess I'm just not cut out for this spiritual life," or "I'm just not cut out for working out. I'm just not cut out for this." No. The definition of a saint is someone who falls but gets up and continues to try again and again to grow closer to God and to live out his will. I don't know what ended up happening with that girl that came to see me. As time went on and she'd share her continued mess ups, I could see that was taking a toll on her, and she was having that defeatist attitude, like, "Oh man, I'm just a failure. I guess I'm just not cut out for this. I guess living this way is just my lot in life." And so she started coming around less and less, and then I moved. But I do hope and pray that she found a way to make it past the vipers. But I just don't know. And the reality is I may never know this side of heaven. So we will leave it there for today, Catholic pilgrims. Awareness of the snares on the journey through life will give you an upper hand. And being realistic about expectations and setting sustainable, attainable goals for ourselves is the way to keep moving through the mansions to find God in that principal chamber. And so just keep that in mind. If you're feeling that defeatist mentality, if things just aren't going your way, just regroup, just take a step back, reset your goals, and try again, and have some mercy on yourself. So have a blessed day. I'll talk to you soon. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.